Hey, this is Rein Review. Gonna cover how to control the map properly, setting up before the fight, how controlling proper space helps with your resource management, how the space you want to control changes depending on your and enemy team composition. We'll talk about power positions, what are those exactly, and how you and your team can get value from those. Enjoy this video. If the team is really mixed, you still can kind of look at what your team comp is more about, because it's kind of more about the brawl, like shorten the distance because of this. Like actually, like those characters, and this actually true, like the Baptiste, he also likes to play a little bit of a team composition, shorter distances, because he likes to that people play more stacked together. That is where brawl team compositions are. Yeah, that is how you usually play those. Some bigger group is usually stacked around you, and some of the other people, they tend to take angles. Like this person here probably would be taking angle. Genji or Reaper, they can also look to take slight angles as well. So that is how you look at it mainly. Think about the spaces which your team want to use. What kind of spaces you want to be using with the brawl team comp usually. Try to compare like the spam team comp to the brawl.
We want to be playing like stacked, either straight into the enemy or maybe flank them. And after we take this high ground from them, like immediately drop down.
Look at these priorities though. So you can do this, you can do that, you can do this. What's easier?
I think 2 is like easier.
Yeah, this is completely enclosed space, really short range space, and that is the spaces you usually want to use as a brawl team composition, because in those spaces, especially use a Rein card, they can look for your swings on the enemy, swing multiple people in there first of all, and also your pin is obviously like the tool which allows you to kind of get value. You can maybe pin somebody, but also other characters, they also like those enclosed spaces more, shorter range corners more. If you use those more short range, these characters like maybe the Reaper, because they are not getting poked before the fight starts, they actually able to close the distance and kind of turn the corner and then shoot somebody. Yeah, but if you use the open spaces, like let's say you go from this kind of high ground here and just close the distance this way, because the enemy can react, they can kind of like shoot you for a certain amount of time, then it's kind of less favorable. So if you compare like the space number 1 here, the space number 2, and the space number 3, 2 and 3 are open spaces. The number 1 is enclosed space. That is where you want to play most of the time, and try to leverage those spaces. So either push somebody in there, try to do this, or you go from this space to like space number 2, number 3, kind of mainly. That is the idea with this kind of brawl team composition. So that is why this was really good.
Awesome. So I did really well here.
Yeah. Think about where the fight is gonna be now, and think about what kind of enclosed space you can use to set up the better fight.
This is like at that point, like where I am standing, where I started thinking about that exact question. I was thinking like, okay, so there's 3 places that they can play. Either like those 2 windows up north,
yeah,
or the house behind me, or gate in front of me. But looking at their comp, I predicted that the most likely where they're gonna play is right behind us on like that little door. So after this, you're gonna see me like actually go there. I like let my team push, and then I set myself up like there. So like I can like when they come in, I just swing on them, because like it's a closed space. Yeah. So it's gonna be pretty easy for me and Reaper just swing on them.
It's just important to mention that actually kind of 2 enclosed spaces in here. So we'll see what we probably can get the more value with. Using the right spaces here is extremely crucial. So the space number 1 is good. I also do think that space number 2 is even better in terms of just controlling the map, controlling the objective. Think about it. What the space number 2 allows you to do. If you're controlling the space number 2, then what kind of spaces you can look to contest?
Because I think they win this fight, and that's what they do. They like McCree goes takes high ground, and then they just spam us.
You did mention the enemy team, they can also do this, or they can do that. They can go from space number 1, space number 3. If you think about it, isn't that the space which allows you to shut down the space number 1 and number 3 as well? Like that space number 2?
If they go number 3 and I'm on number 1, I can go to them.
That is also might be a good idea for us to have the place which allows you to shut down more spaces, kind of. If you look at it like the map control perspective. Yeah, that is what map control is. You get the position which allows you to achieve better map control and do this. So you have an option to do this or to do that. Obviously position number 1 is good, but it's not allowing you to like close the distance with number 3 really comfortably because of the distance.
Space number 2 is not important because of high ground. It's important because like it's in the middle. I can take much more space.
Space number 2 is also high ground, but also knowing that we can do those multiple things. By the way, the space number 2 wide so good, it also allows you to do this potentially as well. There are certain people like maybe in scrims, they would try to maybe rush early, like in this space if the enemy team does this. Don't have to also necessarily wait for them to make the move like this in the gates. This position here allows us to control that position really well and kind of like go from one space to another. If you are at this space, you're kind of making it clear what space you're holding. Maybe if you're also communicating that at your level, kind of saying, oh, let's hold this space, but then we look for the rush on somebody, yeah? Because it's more clear, because your team is gonna be following you, so you're kind of initiating, then your team follows, and you can kind of avoid this as well. You're telling your team, guys, I'm in this space, you need to capitalize on that. So Reaper is like, oh wait, my Reinhardt's in here, I have to do something. So it's kind of like little baiting them in.
That's what happened, I'm pretty sure. So like when Reaper died there, I wasn't like saying anything, I was just doing it without like telling them I'm contesting high ground. But immediately next fight, I said in comms, like, and after this, I'm gonna contest high ground, and then I went to space number 2.
Yeah, just faster. Just honestly, already a really good thinking, already a really good like vector. That is good direction. Being faster about it, kind of understanding this nuance as well, like which space is more valuable. So you're looking to contest. If you look at it this way, is that the space which you want to use?
No, I don't know why I went there. I do not know why I went there. I'm getting poked. They have all the spaces they want. My shield is at half health.
This is really open space, right? Because we're going through that open space. Some people could say, yeah, just stuck on the Reinhardt, just move. But in ranked reality, and especially in reality of Overwatch 2, even though you're stuck on the Reinhardt and move to the open space, what's gonna happen? The enemy's still gonna have an angle to shoot behind the shield. For that exact reason, you also want to avoid those open spaces and try to be somewhere else. So where we want to go then?
I think space number 3.
Space number 3, I think, is good possibly. Now, what are we gonna be doing after that? So let's say you got space number 3. What kind of space you need to look to contest later?
We just go into like that house, and then we go up and take care of that McCree. He has a really nice angle on us. Drop down behind them, and then we just clean up from there.
Yeah, this is gonna be also connected because using this house, you're gonna be utilizing enclosed spaces more. You're not doing this mistake where you go from space number 3 to kind of open space where they can just surround you. Because the idea is we deal with important angles first, we deal with important positions first always. We can call it this power positions here, because enemies, they're able to set up multiple angles of attack, like on the point this way. So we want to contest that first, make sure our team is kind of setting up on this maybe as well, and then later, after you push that position, you can maybe stabilize, but then later you can look to collapse on somebody here. That is extremely important. If you look at it this way, how much pressure now the McCree can do, it forces maybe the Moira fade or something. Poor Moira is getting shot at from multiple directions. Your Ana is supposed to hide, then other people like the Genji, it's just gonna be harder for them to close the distance unless they do this. By the way, look what Reaper did here. He's using exactly those synchro spaces more, and because he's using those synchro spaces, he's not getting spammed as much, and then he can close the distance and kill those ranged characters. Reaper can look to flank that position, and then could look to use that other position. The shadow is good, obviously. If you use the right space, that helps you with the resources, because then suddenly, because you're using that better space, you're not gonna be using as many resources. Maybe just doing shadow will be enough, or just doing nano will be enough, or just doing one coalescence, which is also pretty easy to farm. That will be enough as well.
The reason why we won that fight is because their tank is the Doomfist that I sent you, and yeah, that game he was like feeding. Like he's not a really good tank.
Overwatch is really like the game of resources, because sometimes there will be cases, let's say you won the fight, but what was the cost? You won the fight, but because we used 2 ultimates, that is really big cost. But you could be potentially taking that power position, pushing the enemy team out, and maybe you don't need the ultimates because of it.
Yeah, that's why we lost the next fight. They just used ultimates, and we didn't have any ults to counter.
You're kind of close to the point, but look at this. This is what is scary about those positions, because the people like the Hog or maybe anybody else, they also use that. That is what kills your team, because they are on those angles. So we want to not only like set up our team in there, but also push those angles. So the same thing we can think about again is where the fight is going to be, and trying to use those other spaces, yeah, more enclosed spaces. You can try to go maybe this way, yeah, like let's say use the windows, because you're now not exposed to range damage anymore, because you use that entire building. Always you've been here, then you're gonna save some of your shield, maybe you're gonna save some of other resources like the Moira healing, and then later you can collapse with full resources and the enemy basically. Enclosed spaces versus the spam tinker positions if you run somewhat of a brawl solely kind of short-range variation of the team composition. So if you think about it, the enemy team, they're also not smart about it. They're not using those positions to kind of, they're not contesting those important angles. They kind of stack together, but in reality, they could be maybe doing this, and then they can also have somebody here, then get much more value, not allow you to even close the distance with something when you're using this open space. We actually getting value because of the enemy team. They are really mispositioned. They're kind of in one place, so this kind of allows you to pressure this one group of people with your shield, block all of the damage, and then pressure them back. That works. It's just something which is, again, not really gonna be harmful or anything. It's always valuable to do this first and then do something later, because better plays they set up in there, you can try to push that. If they are not set up, then you still can drop and do things. You're just gonna have more resources. Basically, like here, you would have maybe more of your shield or something, and then you can close the distance easily. And then maybe instead of you looking for the shatter here exactly,
I didn't hear the Genji blading, so I shattered mindless. I don't know. I don't know why I shattered it.
Yeah, it's just one of the things, right? I actually understand probably like why we shatter. Think about it, like you're under high pressure because you lost your shield also. That is one of the reasons when you make sure you're secure trying to use the ultimate. But because you would secure more with your shield, then you could just say, okay, let me just go aggressive with that Genji. I'm just gonna drop like on that backline. And if I really need to shatter, then I can do that. But nothing's really gonna happen to me because I have most of my shield anyway. Also, at the start, I can always shield myself. It's just kind of for the later. You can check if you need the shatter really. That is the case also. I think we're gonna die, but we're gonna die because we didn't use the right spaces. Maybe we've been mispositioned. Maybe we didn't use a lot of resources unnecessarily, something like that. And like think about the Ana players, for example. If they use their sleep dart early, the Genji or enemy tracer, they can just put so much more pressure because they're not scared of you anymore. If you think about it like from Corner's perspective, right? We mentioned using enclosed spaces, but what the enclosed spaces give you, that there's high possibility for you to not take range damage sometimes because you're holding the high ground like this. You are also able to avoid the range damage and then collapse on somebody, but you have to do it in the right time. So because you're maybe holding around this area or something, you're not gonna be taking range damage from these people under. That is okay, but then we just gotta be recognizing when to pressure so we get the highest value. I think there are like maybe two options. You either lean towards the first, actually, or the second, which is even better, I think, because you know that the card is probably gonna get stopped under the bridge. It's just the way you like utilize the corners, because you utilize that first, kind of lean towards that little bit more enclosed space here, and then you drop on the enemy this way because you're using that correctly. You're not gonna be exposed to range damage, so that is good. Or like doing this is also fine, but again, she goes on you, then you can respond to that. If you're really communicating with your team, one of the options is also doing this type of plays. I'm just saying this is also possible, but try to do it in the right time. If you have the team which is communicating with you, if you can, try to use the enclosed spaces to that point where you collapse in their backline like this. If you do it in the right time, obviously, like you need your point probably. Anybody who is pushing the point, they need to synchronize the pressure with you. That is the thing you can look for too. You have an enclosed space here. This choke you can use, kind of. If they turn the corner, you can hit them, and you can avoid getting hit before they get on you by holding this corner, basically. This is extremely powerful. The only problem which we have is that they have the lead now. They don't have to do any move. They don't have to try to be really aggressive or anything. They can just hold this, maybe don't do much. Eventually they will win because they spam team composition. So if you don't have a lead, something to think about as well is really, especially in those cases, I would say. With the brawl, it's also kind of the thing as well. You cannot take really long fights as well, but it's even more true if you're in those cases where you don't have the lead. You need to try to think about how do you win. Yeah, what kind of spaces you will be using, so you kind of shut down the enemy, maybe go on their backline, something like that. Doing this again probably. So let's say we did this, and then you collapse in their backline or something, and then eventually you kind of win this fight because of it. Maybe you go on the Ana, and then later you go on the Hog. That is possible. If your team is not following you though, take enclosed space, leverage the enclosed space. Maybe even, let's say you stop in the point or something. Sometimes you can even try to use those rooms or something as a brawl team composition. I literally hold in there. There are a lot of examples when people do play. If you are playing the brawl team composition on Junkertown, a lot of people, they just use enclosed spaces like this, close to spawn, and then they're able to contest the cart and deal with people on the cart once they close to them. Yeah, people tend to do this sometimes, hold this building here, and like look to rush the cart after. So they're using enclosed spaces with the brawl team comp. Sometimes people also do this, but this is better. If you have the proper brawl team composition. It just gives you a little bit better map control this way, I think. It's just this second type of the hold usually, if you have the May or something, so you block this door completely and then you rush at the enemy. This is the thought process you can look for. Something you can also do as brawl team composition a lot of times is trying to look for a spawn hold like this when you are on the first point, like around here. So it's gonna be you using this building here, like literally playing inside of this, and you contest the point from here, and you can also run on the enemy and even run on their backline, like maybe trying to do this and trying to do like something from here. That is just the power of enclosed spaces. Like really experienced teams, that is how they play, because they will not take any range damage from this spot because they're in this building. That is really powerful. Inexperienced teams though, they tend to play in the open here, and then they just kind of taking too much damage from all the places, all the angles. What kind of spaces you need to use with your team?
Like we got Kiriko and Genji to like dive, but we got McCree and Ana as well. So we do want kind of like open spaces. We do want to play with angles for the McCree and Ana, and then when they're set up, I can go in with my Genji and my Kiriko.
The first part which you're thinking about is correct. I think like the angles and everything. What I also think is something what a lot of players they not paying attention to is paying attention to the enemy team comp and think how to stop them. If you look at the enemy team comp as well, what are they really strong at?
Going like straight in your face and like just diving backlines.
Diving backlines because they mainly have this kind of dive core in here. They have a Doomfist, they have a Lucio, they have a Genji. So these people can easily dive you. That is where it's gonna be like you're playing versus this dive core, and your core is kind of really mixed. You have this some of the dive characters like Kiriko and Genji, but you also do have that short range. McCree and you also short range. So it's gonna be a little bit difficult for you to identify what they exactly do. Like you mentioned, yeah, like you're right, you need the angles. If you think about the dive is really strong when you can take multiple angles to attack on the enemy. When you kind of use this, maybe like this short range angles, this angles or something, and when you can kind of collapse in that open spaces. Dive can usually start in the short range corners, but they're looking to play split at the start usually, and then they're looking to collapse on somebody. And because of this open space, that is really easy for them to do basically. It's not that easy for you to stop the enemy team dive if you're playing in those more openish spaces, because they can take angles like this and like that. So your idea if you're playing against the dive is to limit amount of angles you're exposed to. You don't want to be exposed to too many angles basically, so you don't want to be playing like in those two open spaces in your case too. Where we can go then, because that is the problem we'll be facing. If we go in this space, it's gonna be difficult.
Try to go behind the point.
I think so too, and you obviously gonna be utilizing the angles. You mentioned some people like to take angles. Yeah, obviously your Genji, your Kiriko, your Ana, they will like to take angles, but at the start you will be thinking about using the spaces which are allowing you to limit the amount of angles you're exposed to. Obviously it requires you to do some scouting. Like at the start, probably the first fight might be a little bit confusing, but at least the fights after that, or maybe like let's say you start the first fight, you do some scouting. As soon as you know they have a dive team position, you can kind of move towards those spaces where that is not that exposed to the divers basically, and after that you can look to rush somebody. Your maybe Genji can take the angles on the window, maybe play around here. The Ana can also try to do something, even look for flank nade or something, but just gotta be careful. I can give you an example. The enemy team, they actually still have like a lot of short range members, but they have a dive team position, so they really wanna be collapsing from multiple angles, kind of like on that open spaces, because it's easier for them. But London Speedfire knows that, so they just gonna be avoiding this open spaces completely by using those enclosed spaces. And basically, obviously they have this more of a pro lead team position. They don't have a mixed team as you, but the idea is the same. Think about how to stop the enemy team from doing something as well. That also gives you a nice idea of what you should be doing, what kind of spaces you can use. So like here, you see them going and using this building, and they even do this entire rotation. So they can kind of maybe rush their backline or something. They want to let you in and then being able to collapse from multiple angles. That is the big threat, your team comp basically, especially in these cases. You have the Brig, she does the really short range damage. To do that range damage, again, using enclosed spaces a little bit more is more powerful. And stopping these guys also because of it too. They can split you completely, especially with the tanks like the Doomfist and the Monkey. A lot of times these tanks are looking to separate you. If you look at their ultimates, like maybe Monkey can also try to separate somebody, isolate somebody with that ultimate, and then Davers can capitalize on that. With the Doomfist, because of his punch, it's also the part of his job to like separate you, and then the enemy can dive the backline or something. So that is what happens. Like, let's say the Doomfist punches your way, and then the enemy team can just like, oh, okay, these guys are isolated now. We isolated them. Perfect. Yeah, because Lucio just booped somebody out, and like the Doomfist just punched out somebody, then it's gonna be easier. But it's so hard to split you guys if you're using the spaces. That is the part about it as well, yeah? Doomfist punches you, doesn't matter. Or Lucio boops you out somewhere, that doesn't matter again, because you have these walls. You just kind of get through these walls. Later, you can try to rush somebody from them. Maybe look for some spam damage first. Obviously, it's also good.
Everyone goes like left side here. Because I one-trick Rein, there really isn't any reason for me. Like, I should never go here unless I'm running full poke. I should just go right side because I one-trick Rein.
Full dive, you run left side too, because you like using those open spaces to your advantage, so you can take angles. But the way dive uses this open is by doing this kind of flanks. And so you start at the short range spaces, maybe like corners, and then you collapse on the open. The spam, it just uses the open constantly. So with the dive, you don't go right, you go left. With the poke, you also go left. With the brawl, you go right. Also, this one, what do you think about this matchup? What kind of spaces you should be using?
I just ignore that I have pharmacy, so I only look at like McCree and Ana. Just swing when I can, regen armor and shield, and then swing when I can, and then just, yeah.
Using open spaces a little bit more is okay, because then your Ana can learn the sleep dart and everything. They also actually, like, some of their members like to using this open spaces like the hog, but they're gonna be coming from this like flanks or something, so check for that. They also have like some short range characters, so what are your responses gonna be is like you're using open spaces, but you're just looking to kite, so you're looking to play for the long fight. That is all. So if they have put too much pressure on you, you just don't play here, you'll go here, and then you're good, because they have some limited resources as well, like the Moira healing. That means the longer the fight is, the better for you. One more way to also look at it, yeah. Do we take long fights? Do we take short fights? Yeah, what kind of spaces are we using? That is also good.
Yeah, after we took that space, I would look whether to go right or left. He told me to like where it's better to go, left or right. So I actively like took a second and then figured out what was the best place to go, right or left. And then I think I went right, and then, you know, we won the fight and then won the game.
You using corners correctly, you're going from one corner to another, so it recharges your resources. If you also think about from spaces perspective, with the Rein card, let's walk from this kind of short range space to that short range space, so we can recharge, and then later you can look to do this and that. You avoid the range damage, and you kind of save your resources because of the corners. So maybe you recharge your shield here, and then you recharge your shield at a second. That is still kind of achieving the same thing. You can close the distance with the team eventually, because you're using those spaces. And with the Rein card, that is what you do more, using those enclosed areas, kind of short range areas. Yeah, definitely if it's possible for you, like when you have brawl, using enclosed spaces more. They really need to take space. The problem is why they're losing, they're taking a long fight, because they just playing over here, they get spammed by everything and then they die. That is the big problem. That is why they lose here. And look at the spaces they're using open space, so they get spammed. Something the smart they could do is maybe send somebody over here, use this kind of, let's say they have Pharah or Echo or Pharah can use this space as like corner, which allows them to not get spammed before. Also doing this, by the way, with the Doomfist, you can go all the way here and try to rush the backline. So it's gonna be like this, and this. That is how you solve this map with this team comp. That is what you can do. This is how you solve this map. They're using short range spaces now. They're not using the open spaces. To summarize, when you play Rein with Brawl comp, you usually like to use more short range enclosed spaces. With spam team, play around spaces where your team can do damage with long range abilities continuously. Still use short range spaces if it's needed to avoid getting poked before the fight. Against dive, play in locations where it's really difficult for them to dive from multiple angles angles, contest power positions, push enemy team from those locations, and set up there before the fight. Help your team to control those positions. Power positions give you more options about what to do on the map, and you can control multiple locations because of it. Additionally, it saves your resources too. Make sure to subscribe, and if you want to get coached in Overwatch, then you can find me on Matterify. I do free consultations for new students and have a server where I help players for free. All links in the description.